This is Inclarity Podcast. I'm RJ Starr. Why do some people go their entire lives without ever saying the words, "I'm sorry"? You might notice it in a coworker who doubles down on mistakes, or a family member who storms out instead of owning what they've done, or in a friend who changes the subject whenever their behavior is questioned. What looks like stubbornness on the surface is almost always something deeper, a form of ego protection mixed with social avoidance. To apologize is to admit imperfection, and for some people, that feels intolerable. The act of saying "I'm sorry" threatens the fragile scaffolding that holds their self-image together. If their sense of worth is built on being competent, moral, or in control, then acknowledging harm feels like tearing down the very foundation of who they think they are. In psychology, we call this ego defense. Denial, rationalization, projection, all of these mechanisms are designed to protect the self from shame or inadequacy. Refusing to apologize is simply another version of the same move. Think about the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, "I did something bad." Shame says, "I am bad." For someone with a fragile ego, the leap from guilt to shame happens almost instantly. The apology, which could have been a repair, now feels like a personal annihilation. In their mind, better to avoid the apology altogether than to risk crumbling under shame. And so they stay silent. Social avoidance plays its own role here. Apologies require not just words, but eye contact, tone, timing, and vulnerability. It's an interpersonal transaction. And for people who already feel anxious about confrontation, or those who lack the emotional intelligence skills to navigate it, apologizing becomes a situation to escape. Instead of facing the discomfort of another's disappointment, they retreat. They might minimize the situation, change the subject, or even ghost the relationship entirely. The silence becomes their strategy. There is also power at play. Apologies are a form of submission. They place the apologizer one step down, even if temporarily, in the social hierarchy. For people who cling to control, whether in families or workplaces or friendships, that perceived drop in status feels unbearable. Refusing to say sorry keeps them in the driver's seat, even as the relationship slowly erodes. Cultural differences matter too. In some settings, apologies are viewed as weakness, a loss of face. In others, they are expected, even ritualized, as part of daily interaction. But when someone consistently refuses to apologize, regardless of culture, it tells you something about how they protect themselves from vulnerability. So what happens to relationships when apologies never come? Without acknowledgement, hurt begins to calcify. Small injuries accumulate into large resentments. The person who was wronged learns that waiting for repair is futile, and they begin to protect themselves with distance. Over time, what could have been healed with two simple words turns into a rupture that feels beyond repair, all because ego won the battle against connection. But here's the paradox. Refusing to apologize does not actually protect the ego in the long run. It isolates it. The more a person resists accountability, the more others withdraw. Their image of strength slowly collapses into a reputation for arrogance or coldness. The short-term protection comes at a long-term cost. But what's striking is that apology refusal is not about a lack of awareness. Most people know, at least vaguely, when they've caused harm. It's not ignorance, it's defense. And until the defensive pattern is recognized for what it is, it's not going to change. That recognition sometimes comes through therapy, sometimes through very painful losses, and sometimes it doesn't come at all. If you've ever dealt with someone who can't say, "I'm sorry," you know the temptation to demand it, to push harder for those words. But forcing an apology rarely works. What can work, however, is shifting focus. Instead of chasing their words, clarify your own boundaries. Make clear what behavior is unacceptable for you. Recognize that their silence is about their fear, not your worth. You cannot control their apology, but you can control your participation in the dynamic. And if you recognize yourself in this description, if you notice a hesitation or resistance when the moment for an apology arises, the challenge is to separate self-worth from perfection, to see that apologizing does not make you less. It makes you human. Repair is not a humiliation. It's a skill. And like any skill, it strengthens with practice. So why do some people never say "I'm sorry"? Because apologies demand more than words. They demand the courage to face shame without collapsing, to step into vulnerability without retreating, and to let go of control long enough to restore connection. For those who cannot bear that exposure, silence feels safer. But in that silence, relationships wither and die. And in the end, the very self they were trying to protect ends up more fragile than before. This is Inclarity Podcast. I'm RJ Starr.